My daughter told me at her wedding, "Don't join the photo shoot. I don't want people to see you or my father." I was very sad and couldn't contain it. So I left. But what happened next was rather unexpected. I will tell you how everything unfolded. First, let me quickly thank you for your continuous support. This means a lot to us. If you enjoy the stories we share, kindly subscribe to this channel. It will be great if you can leave a comment on which city you are watching from. We might just give you a shout out in our next story. Today's special shout out goes to Selena Watson from New York. We are glad you enjoy our stories. Now let's go deeper into the story. I stood outside the venue in a pressed suit I hadn't worn in years, hands tucked deep into my pockets to keep them from trembling. It was a beautiful June afternoon, the kind of day you pray for when your daughter gets married. Birds chirped like some Disney script, and the scent of blooming roses floated on a lazy breeze. From the outside, everything looked perfect. But inside me, something felt off. I'd spent the past few weeks rehearsing what I might say to her. I told myself over and over again, this is her day, not mine. Just smile. Just be proud. But nothing prepared me for what she would say when I finally saw her in that white dress, eyes as cold as winter glass. "Don't join the photo shoot. I don't want people to see you or my father." She said it so quietly, so calmly, I almost thought I imagined it. But the words hit me like a slow, cruel slap. I stood there, blinking at her, as guests and bridesmaids bustled around, smiling and laughing, none of them noticing the small crack that just formed in my chest. I opened my mouth, hoping she'd laugh and say she was joking. But she didn't. She turned, adjusted her veil, and walked away before I could even ask why. And just like that, I became invisible, an unwelcome shadow at my own daughter's wedding. I walked away from the photo area, past the garden where she used to chase butterflies as a child, and found a quiet bench near the back of the venue. My chest ached. Not the kind of ache that comes from heartbreak alone, but the ache of years, decades, really, of trying, hoping, and clinging to the role of fatherhood even when everything around me told me to let go. I looked down at my hands. These hands had written checks every month without fail since the day I signed the divorce papers. These hands had packed school supplies, birthday gifts, and little notes she probably never received. And yet today, these same hands were not welcome in the family photos. The worst part wasn't her rejection, it was the history that led us here. I divorced her mother when she was just 9 years old, after discovering the affair. I'll never forget that night. The stammering lies, the strange man slipping out the back door, and the look in my wife's eyes that said she wasn't even sorry. The betrayal was so complete, so cruel, it knocked the wind out of me for weeks. But even in that storm, I made one promise to myself. I will never let my daughter feel unloved or abandoned. I kept that promise, even when her mother poisoned her mind against me. It started subtly, in the way my daughter stopped calling me Dad and switched to my first name. Then came the missed calls, the cold holidays, the letters returned unopened. I couldn't understand it at first. I sent money, always on time. I asked about her grades, her health, her dreams. But the wall between us only grew taller. I once drove 6 hours to see her school play, only to be told she didn't want me there. Still, I never gave up. I told myself she was a child caught in the crossfire. I believed, perhaps foolishly, that one day the truth would find its way through. But this wedding day, it felt like the final nail in the coffin of our relationship. Sitting there alone, I couldn't stop the tears from rising. I kept my head down, pretending to scroll through my phone, hoping no one would notice the quiet devastation on my face. Guests passed by with cheerful nods, unaware that the man on the bench was the father of the bride, the one she didn't want in her photos, her memories, or her story. A waiter came by and offered me a glass of champagne. I declined, too choked up to speak. How do you explain to a stranger that your heart is breaking over a daughter you never stopped loving? How do you explain that you sacrificed, forgave, endured, and still, it wasn't enough? I thought about leaving, just walking away, disappearing before anyone realized I had even come. But I couldn't. Some stubborn part of me refused to let her mother's lies have the final say. As the reception started, I remained at the edge of the celebration, sipping water and nodding politely at distant relatives. I watched her dance with her new husband, smiling like the child I used to know. For a brief second, I saw her as the little girl who once called me her hero. That memory cut deeper than anything. I wanted to believe that some part of her still remembered. I wanted to believe this wasn't entirely her fault. But my chest tightened again, and I realized I was grieving not just the moment, but the years I lost to a lie. That night, I went home and sat alone in the living room. I pulled out the folder I kept locked in my desk, the one with every receipt, every child support transaction, every email I sent asking about her well-being. I stared at it for a long time. Maybe it was time to show her. Maybe it was time to stop letting silence be the story. I had nothing left to lose. The truth is, I didn't see it coming. Not the affair, not the cold unraveling of everything I thought was real. We had been married 12 years by then. 12 years of shared bank accounts, family vacations, school parent-teacher meetings, and grocery lists with scribbled hearts in the margins. We were ordinary, I thought. Safe. I'd get up before dawn to get to work, spend hours on job sites managing construction crews, and come home to a daughter who ran into my arms and a wife who greeted me with a soft kiss on the cheek. That routine, that illusion, became the prison I didn't realize I was living in until the walls gave out. When I found out she was cheating, it wasn't cinematic or explosive. It was slow, quiet, like water eroding stone. It started with a missed call. Her phone lit up on the kitchen counter while she was in the shower. I wasn't snooping. I wasn't that kind of husband. But when a man's name pops up next to a heart emoji on your wife's phone, your stomach does a kind of backflip you never forget. I froze. Something primal stirred in me. Not jealousy, not even rage, just dread. I remember how cold the kitchen floor felt against my bare feet as I stood there, staring at the screen. I didn't answer the call. I just waited. That night, I watched her. Really watched her. The way she avoided my eyes, the sudden protectiveness over her phone, the too careful explanations about late nights helping a friend. It didn't take long to confirm what I already knew. The confrontation happened 3 days later. I asked her directly, calmly, hoping I was wrong, but she didn't even try to deny it. Her face turned stony, almost defiant, and then she said something that still echoes in my head. "You haven't made me feel wanted in years." I stood there, numb, as if she had just reached into my chest and unplugged the power source. I had been working 60-hour weeks to keep us afloat, to make sure our daughter had everything she needed. I never cheated, never stayed out late. I made it home for bedtime stories. I kissed her forehead every night, even when I was exhausted. But none of it counted. None of it protected me from the cold calculus of her dissatisfaction. The divorce wasn't drawn out. She wanted out, and I didn't see the point in begging someone to stay who had already left emotionally. But when it came to custody, I fought. I didn't want to lose my daughter. That little girl was my anchor, my reason. I gave up the house, most of the savings, even my tools, just to ensure I had joint custody and visitation. I agreed to a monthly child support payment that was steep but manageable. I paid it like clockwork. Never missed. Not once. I even paid ahead during slow seasons at work, just in case. Because I wanted her to know I was still her father, still responsible, still present, even if I wasn't sleeping under the same roof. But that's where my ex-wife began her real damage. She didn't fight me in court. She fought me in my daughter's mind. I didn't realize it at first. Kids get quiet after divorce. They withdraw. I thought it was normal. But then the changes started. She stopped calling me daddy. She started asking why I didn't buy her new shoes like mom did. She asked if I had another family, if I had abandoned them. I was floored. Where was this coming from? I asked her mother, and she gave me that tight, smug smile, the one I used to mistake for grace, and said, "Maybe you should ask yourself that." I remember the first time I sent a birthday gift, and it was never acknowledged. My daughter told me she never received it. I checked the tracking, it was signed for. I confronted my ex, and she shrugged. She must have forgotten. But I knew. I started sending things with signature confirmation, saving every bank statement, every transaction. Not because I wanted to prove anything, but because I had a growing fear that someday I'd need to. The worst moment came on a summer visitation weekend. My daughter was maybe 13. She sat in my truck, arms folded, lips tight. I asked if everything was okay. She didn't look at me when she said, "Mom says you only send money when the court threatens you." My hands gripped the wheel so tight I thought I'd snap it in two. I took a breath. That's not true, I said softly. I've never missed a payment. Never. She stared out the window. That's not what she said. I pulled over to the side of the road and turned to her. Sweetheart, I have every receipt. I can show you. She interrupted me. I don't want to see it. Her voice cracked. And in that crack, I heard it. The confusion. The hurt. The manipulation. She didn't want evidence. She wanted a version of the world to be true, and I wasn't the author of that version. Her mother was. That was the moment I realized I'd lost her, not physically, but emotionally. She had built her identity on the belief that I had failed her, and she clung to that belief because it gave her clarity. I was the villain. Her mother, the hero. There's comfort in simplicity, even when it's a lie. And so I became the absent father, the unreliable man, the stranger at birthdays, even while I stood outside in the cold every December, watching through a frosted window, hoping for a wave. That false narrative became the backbone of their life. My ex-wife played the martyr, the struggling single mother. She would call and ask for more money, just for extras, never admitting to our daughter that I was already paying more than required. When I asked for more time with her, I was told she was too busy or needed stability. And when I complained, I was accused of being difficult. Over time, I grew silent, not because I didn't care, but because nothing I said seemed to matter. I thought silence might keep the peace. But all it did was let the lies grow louder. Looking back now, I can see how carefully it was all orchestrated. My ex didn't just cheat on me in marriage, she cheated me out of fatherhood. She turned my daughter against me with the precision of someone who had nothing left to lose. And maybe she didn't. Maybe bitterness consumed her so thoroughly that destroying me became her only solace. But she forgot one thing: I don't quit on people I love. And I never stopped loving my daughter. Time has a cruel way of folding in on itself when you're estranged from someone you love. Some years felt like minutes, others stretched out like lifetimes, and I never knew which kind I was walking into until I'd already passed through it. After the divorce, after the betrayal, after the cold silencing of my voice in my daughter's life, I still held on to hope like it was the last thread keeping me tethered to the idea of family. But the longer the distance grew between us, the harder it became to know what was real and what was just my own imagination begging for connection. I'd find myself scrolling through photos from when she was 5 or 6, grinning with missing teeth, holding my hand at the zoo, coloring beside me on the living room floor. In those photos, I was her world. But in the years that followed, I became a stranger with the same last name. The worst part wasn't the silence, it was the waiting. Waiting for a phone call on Christmas that never came. Waiting outside her school during my scheduled visit, only to be told she was sick or too tired. Waiting for her to open the birthday cards I kept mailing, wondering if they ever reached her hands. I used to call every Sunday at 6, just like the court agreement said I could. At first, she answered short replies, monosyllables, distracted by the television or friends in the background. Then the calls went to voicemail. Then the number was changed. I asked her mother what happened. Her reply came as a text: "She doesn't want to talk right now." You should respect that. Respect. That word became a weapon. I was supposed to respect her distance. Respect her confusion. Respect the new boundaries drawn not by my daughter, but by the woman who had systematically erased me from her life. And I tried. God knows I tried. I didn't fight back publicly. I didn't drag her mother through the mud in front of our daughter. I believed the truth would eventually rise, like oil on water. But all the while, my daughter was growing up with a warped version of me. One I didn't recognize, and one I was powerless to correct. I remember the day she turned 16. I had saved up to buy her a used car, a small, reliable hatchback. I didn't have much, but I wanted her to feel celebrated. I had the car detailed, tied a ribbon to the hood, and drove it to her house with shaking hands. I didn't tell her I was coming. I wanted it to be a surprise. Her mother opened the door, looked at the car, then at me, and said, "She doesn't need charity from someone who's been absent her whole life." I stood there, stunned. My mouth opened, but no words came out. I wasn't absent. I was erased. There's a difference. But she shut the door before I could explain. I left the car parked out front and drove away. I don't know if she ever drove it. She never called to say thank you. She never called at all. The years between 16 and her college graduation were the hardest. By then, she was old enough to reach out if she wanted to. I told myself maybe she needed time to process, to untangle the lies from the truth. I sent letters, handwritten, personal, filled with memories and apologies for things I wasn't even sure I did. I told her I loved her, that I never gave up on her. I included copies of some of the receipts, just a few, not enough to overwhelm her, just enough to make her wonder. I never got a reply. Sometimes I wondered if she threw them away without reading them. Other times, I liked to imagine she kept them in a box somewhere, trying to make sense of the pieces. That fantasy kept me going more than I'd like to admit. There were moments, rare ones, when I saw her from afar. At a cousin's wedding, she sat across the room with her mother, laughing, radiant. I wanted to approach, to say hello, but her expression changed the second she saw me. She turned her back, and I turned my heart to stone. At a family barbecue, she walked past me like I was a ghost. My sister tried to bring us together once, invited both of us to her house under the guise of just dinner. It backfired. My daughter left halfway through the meal, telling my sister she didn't want to be ambushed. I didn't blame her. If everything she believed about me was true, then of course she'd protect herself. I would have done the same. But the hardest moment, the one I still think about late at night, was when I saw her walking down the street one afternoon. She didn't see me. She was with friends, laughing, alive in a world I had no part in. She looked so much like her mother at that age it hurt. And in that moment, I realized I wasn't just grieving a daughter. I was grieving the life I was never allowed to witness. I missed her first heartbreak, her driver's test, her late-night college essays. I missed her jokes, her mistakes, her small victories. I missed it all, not because I chose to, but because someone else chose for me. Still, I never stopped hoping. I saved every receipt, every letter, every canceled check. I kept a folder in my desk labeled with her name, thinking that one day she might ask me for the truth. And when she did, I wanted to be ready not to say I told you so, but to say I was always here. Every year that passed without her voice hurt a little more, but I never let that pain turn into bitterness. I wouldn't let her mother win that way. I wouldn't become the man I was accused of being. And so I waited. I lived. I worked. I smiled when people asked about my family and said things like, "She's doing well, last I heard." I protected her reputation even when mine was being dismantled in private, because she was still my daughter, even if I wasn't her father anymore. The wedding broke something in me that I didn't know was still intact. I'd been surviving on scraps of hope for so long. Small things like a returned message, a smile across a crowded room, a memory that didn't hurt, that I didn't realize how fragile it had all become until she looked me in the eye and said she didn't want anyone to know I was her father. That wasn't just rejection, it was erasure. Complete. Deliberate. And as I sat alone on the edge of her celebration, the only thing I could think was, she hates me. Not just misunderstands me, she truly believes I was never there. That idea gutted me. It unspooled years of restraint I'd held on to, thinking silence was some noble form of love. But that night, as I sat at my kitchen table in a suit I hadn't yet taken off, staring at the dim light flickering above the sink, I realized silence had become complicity. If I didn't speak up now, if I didn't show her the truth, then I was helping the lie survive. The folder had been sitting in the bottom drawer of my desk for over a decade. I never labeled it anything dramatic. Just her name, written in black ink, Maya. Inside were carefully stacked receipts, money order stubs, child support payment confirmations, email exchanges with her mother, even a few holiday cards that had been returned to me unopened. I hadn't added anything to the folder in years, but I never threw it away. It felt sacred somehow, like evidence of my side of the story, even if no one ever cared to hear it. That night, I opened it slowly, like I was disarming a bomb. Each document I pulled out brought back a wave of emotion. The birthday gift I sent when she turned 10, rejected. The confirmation of my wire transfer 3 days after her mother said I had vanished. And there it all was, truth laid out in dates, dollar signs, and proof I had never stopped trying. I spent hours that night scanning the papers into a folder on my laptop. I didn't want to overwhelm her, but I wanted her to see that I wasn't lying. I created a PDF, titled simply, for Maya, and wrote a message in the body of the email that took me nearly an hour to finish. I kept deleting and rewriting, trying to strike the right balance between honesty and restraint. In the end, I wrote, "Maya, I'm not sending this to guilt you or to ask for anything. I just want you to know the truth. I've made mistakes, but disappearing wasn't one of them. I have always loved you. These are just some records, receipts, messages that show my efforts over the years. I know it won't undo the past, but maybe it will help you see a fuller picture. I'm here if you ever want to talk. Love always, Dad. I hit send before I could talk myself out of it. My hands trembled for hours afterward. I didn't expect a reply. I didn't expect anything. I just needed her to see. I needed the truth to finally have a voice, even if it was through attachments and timestamps. The next evening, my phone rang. I didn't recognize the number, but something in me knew. I answered it with a cautious, hello? And then came the sound I hadn't heard in years, her voice. But this time it was broken, trembling. Dad, that one word cracked open something in me I thought had fossilized. I couldn't speak at first. My throat tightened and tears pooled in my eyes. I managed a quiet, yeah, baby, I'm here. And then came the sobbing. Raw, unfiltered, guttural sobs, like years of confusion were clawing their way out of her lungs. She kept saying, I didn't know, over and over, like a prayer she'd only just discovered. I sat there, hunched over on the edge of the couch, clutching the phone to my ear like it was the only thing keeping me grounded. We didn't talk much that first call. It was mostly silence and tears on both ends. She apologized again and again, saying things like, she told me you never paid, and I thought you just didn't care. I didn't interrupt. I let her pour it out. Her words were messy, contradictory, emotional, but every word felt like a piece of the wall between us crumbling. Over the next few days, we started texting. Little things at first. How's work? Or do you still drink that awful black coffee? Like she was tiptoeing through a minefield of memories, unsure which ones were safe. I told her the truth. Always. Gently. Without resentment. I didn't want to scare her off. I didn't want to say, see, I told you. That wasn't the point. The point was healing, not winning. Eventually, she asked the question I'd been waiting for. Why didn't you ever say anything? That one hurt more than anything. I told her. In letters, voicemails, messages passed through family. But I explained that I didn't want to make her choose sides, didn't want to drag her into the ugliness between her mother and me. I said I believed, foolishly perhaps, that love would speak for itself. She was quiet after that. I think it was the first time she realized silence can be just as damaging as lies. Then came the next step, her confrontation with her mother. I wasn't there, but she told me about it afterward. She went over with her laptop, pulled up the file I sent, and asked her mom to explain. She said the room went cold. Her mother tried to pivot, to blame me, to say the documents were doctored. But Maya didn't buy it. Not anymore. She'd seen enough. She told me she felt sick afterward, like her entire childhood had a crack down the middle she hadn't noticed until now. But she also said she felt lighter, as if the fog she'd been walking through all her life had suddenly lifted. We talked late into the night after that. She asked questions. I answered them with honesty. I told her about the car I bought for her 16th birthday. She started crying all over again. Said she never even knew about it. I told her about the school play I drove to see but wasn't allowed inside. About the birthday cards returned in the mail. Every story, every detail was another thread stitching us back together, slowly, painfully, but permanently. That week marked the beginning of something new between us. It wasn't perfect. There was still a lot of pain, a lot of missed time. But it was real. And for the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe again. It wasn't revenge I wanted, never was. What I wanted was clarity, closure. I wanted the lies to stop weighing down my daughter's view of the world. I wanted my name back in her heart, not just in her inbox. But the more we talked, the more Maya began to unravel the full extent of what her mother had done. It was like watching someone slowly wake up from a long, distorted dream. She kept texting me small memories, things she used to take as truth. How her mom would cry and say I abandoned them when bills were due, or how I supposedly told her over the phone I had a new family now. Lies. Complete fabrications. I never said those things, never even hinted at them. And hearing them now, with Maya's adult understanding, it was like walking through the wreckage of a home I once built with my bare hands, seeing it for what it had become, shattered beyond recognition. Maya had changed since the wedding. There was a quiet intensity in her voice now. She was processing years of betrayal, not just from me being pushed out of her life, but from realizing that the person she trusted most, her mother, had weaponized that trust to maintain control. I didn't push her to confront her. That decision had to be hers. But deep down, I knew it was coming. There's a limit to how long someone can carry confusion without seeking the truth from its source. And when the day came, she didn't tell me in advance. She just went. Showed up at her mother's house with the folder I'd sent, questions in her eyes, and anger she was trying hard to keep from spilling over. Later that night, she called me. I could hear the heaviness in her breath before she even spoke. She lied to me, she said. Dad, she looked me in the face and lied again. Even when I showed her everything, she said you forged it, that you were manipulating me. There was a pause, long and broken. Then, her voice cracked. She kept saying you were the liar, that she did everything for me. But I saw it, Dad. I didn't know what to say. What could I say? The grief in her voice wasn't for me. It was for the life she thought she had, for the mother she believed in, for the stories she carried like gospel. I asked her if she ever told me the truth about anything, she whispered. She didn't answer. She just cried and told me I was being ungrateful. Ungrateful. That word lit a fuse in me I hadn't touched in years. Her mother had always played the victim. Even when she was the one cheating, the one distorting facts, she somehow spun every confrontation into an act of persecution. But now that illusion had cracked, and Maya wasn't falling for it anymore. I told her I needed space, Maya said. I told her I don't know when or if I can forgive her. Her voice grew quieter. Is that wrong? I closed my eyes. No, baby. It's not wrong. It's honest. You don't owe forgiveness on someone else's timeline. I meant that. I didn't want Maya to carry anyone's guilt, not mine, not her mother's. She deserved space to feel everything, unfiltered and censored. In the days that followed, word spread through our extended family. Not from me. I kept my mouth shut, as I always had, but from Maya. She started having conversations, asking relatives what they remembered. Some were shocked. Others admitted they'd always suspected something wasn't right. My sister, who had tried so hard to keep the peace over the years, told me she cried when Maya finally came to her and asked, "Why didn't anyone tell me?" My sister answered honestly, "We didn't know how. And we didn't want to make it worse." I understood that, but it didn't make it easier. Then one afternoon, I got the call I never expected. My ex-wife. I almost didn't answer. My finger hovered over the screen for a full 10 seconds before I picked up. Her voice was brittle, defensive. "So now she hates me," she started. No hello. No pretense. Just straight into the fallout. I stayed silent. She kept going. "You've poisoned her against me. After everything I did for that girl, she turns on me the second you send her some papers." Her voice cracked, anger disguised as hurt. "You know I raised her. I made sacrifices. And you, what? You think a few receipts erase all that?" I waited. Then finally, I spoke. "No," I said. "But they tell the truth. And you never did." She started crying then, not the kind of sobs that beg for empathy, but the shrill, wounded kind that come when control slips away. "You don't understand what it was like," she spat. "You left me." I cut her off, gently but firmly. "You cheated on me. You drove me out of that house. And then you took my daughter and built a story around my absence that suited you. You didn't just lie, Lisa. You stole her from me." The line went quiet. I could hear her breathing, hear the weight of years pressing down on both of us. I didn't need an apology. I didn't even expect one. But for the first time in our long, bitter history, I needed her to know I was done playing the quiet one. "You don't get to rewrite this anymore," I said. "She knows. And she'll decide what to do with that. Not you. We haven't spoken since. Maya and I, though, we've started rebuilding. It's a slow process. There's no switch to flip, no magical reunion. But there's movement. She sends me photos now of her new apartment, of her dog, of silly things she used to think I wouldn't care about. I ask about her job, her hobbies. We even joked recently about how she used to hate my corny dad jokes, and I told her I had a whole backlog saved just for her. We laughed. It wasn't the kind of laughter we used to share when she was little, but it was ours. Real. Earned. Honest. The reckoning wasn't about vengeance. It was about truth. It was about finally breaking the silence that had held me hostage for too long. And in that break, something remarkable happened. We found each other again. It's strange how healing doesn't always feel like joy. Sometimes it feels like quiet, like breathing without the weight pressing down on your chest, like being able to sit in a room, alone, and not feel like you're waiting for someone who won't come. In the months after everything unraveled, after Maya learned the truth, after her mother was exposed for the years of deceit, I found myself relearning how to just be a father. Not the father begging for space or proving worth with receipts and desperate letters, but a father who was finally allowed to exist in his child's life without being filtered through someone else's version of him. And that freedom, it didn't come with celebration or applause. It came with silence, with long walks alone, with sitting in my truck some mornings and letting the tears fall where no one could see. Maya and I didn't suddenly become a Hallmark story. We didn't wrap arms around each other and declare that all the pain had been worth it. That would have been dishonest. What we did was something slower, more fragile, and ultimately more profound. We built boundaries. We talked. She asked me hard questions, and I answered every one of them, even when the answers hurt. I never blamed her. Not once. I told her that children believe the story they're given. And when you're raised in a narrative that paints one parent as the villain, it becomes your map for the world. She told me she felt ashamed. That was the word she kept coming back to. Ashamed. I told her she had nothing to be ashamed of. The shame didn't belong to her. It belonged to the one who needed to lie in the first place. As for her mother, we kept our distance. Maya told me she hadn't cut her off entirely, but things had changed. There was no more blind trust, no more unearned loyalty. She set her own boundaries. She stopped letting guilt dictate her choices. And I supported that, not because I wanted revenge, but because I knew how hard it was to protect your peace from someone who taught you to ignore your instincts. Lisa tried, now and then, to reassert her influence. Passive-aggressive messages, emotional phone calls. But Maya saw it clearly now. She was no longer a child. She was a woman with her own voice, and she used it. One afternoon, maybe 5 months after the wedding, Maya and I sat on a park bench eating sandwiches from a food truck. It was a simple moment, two people sharing a meal. But for me, it was sacred. She turned to me and said, "You know what hurts the most?" I looked at her and waited. That I thought you didn't want me. All those years, I thought I wasn't worth fighting for. I had to look away. My throat tightened. I wanted to tell her that I had fought, for years, in ways she never saw. But instead, I said the only thing that mattered. You were always worth fighting for. Always. She didn't say anything after that. Just leaned her head on my shoulder and sat with me in the quiet. That was the day I realized something vital. This second chance wasn't just about reconnecting. It was about letting go. Letting go of the version of fatherhood I had mourned. Letting go of the years I could never get back. Letting go of the bitterness that had tried to root itself in me, even when I swore I wouldn't let it. For the first time, I wasn't driven by the need to prove I was right. I had been right, yes, but the truth had already done its job. What I wanted now was peace. For me. For her. Even, in some way, for her mother, though I'd never let her that close again. Boundaries became a quiet revolution in my life. I no longer felt guilty for not replying to Lisa's messages. I no longer explained myself to extended family who once judged me from the outside. I stopped justifying my existence to people who never asked for the full story. I lived. I worked. I found moments of joy in ordinary things, coffee in the morning, watching old westerns on Sunday afternoons, fixing up the garage just because I could. And when Maya visited, we created new memories. Ones not built on guilt or shadows, but on choice. She even asked me to take a photo together one day. Just the two of us. No occasion. No family event. Just us. I didn't cry in the moment. I held it together for the camera. But later that night, sitting alone with that photo in my hand, I broke down. Because in that single frame was everything I had waited for. Acknowledgement, redemption, and the simple, healing presence of my daughter beside me. I used to think forgiveness had to be this grand gesture, a reconciliation, a tearful embrace, a wiping away of all the wrongs. But now I see it differently. Forgiveness, for me, was choosing not to carry the weight anymore. It was putting down the folder of receipts, not because they didn't matter, but because they'd done their job. They'd told the story, and the story had finally been heard. I don't know what the future holds for Maya and me. I don't pretend that the scars are gone. But I know this. The chains that held us back, lies, manipulation, silence, they're broken now. And in their place is something real. Something fragile, yes, but true. And that's enough. If this story moved you or made you reflect on the quiet sacrifices and unseen struggles within families, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more emotionally raw and deeply personal stories. Your support helps bring these hidden truths to light and gives voice to those who've endured in silence. Let us know in the comments how this resonated with you. We'd love to hear your thoughts. See you soon in the next one.